Wanting to talk today about what to do. This is just my advice. I was just inspired to talk about this today for a number of reasons. I have been, um, you know, getting ready for the new year and getting ready for break. And actually, let me make sure my microphone is working. Um, and I was watching a show called Blackish, and one of the characters in the show, um, Junior, I couldn't remember his name. It was the episode, it was the gap year episode, and it was talking about how he is. For those of you who don't know about Blackish, it's a show with I can't even explain what the show is about. But anyway, it's a family, and they have five children, and one of the children is going off to college. That's what the episode that I'm specifically talking about. And like, I think he lasts in college like 2 days, and then he comes back home like really quickly. And the episode was called a gap year because he decided that he needed a gap year before he actually went off to college. And so that's what the episode was about. And that inspired me to think about, what would my advice be for a gap year? Because I think, in my opinion, they did everything all wrong with the gap year. Because you can have a gap year, but you can't just have like one of the main character, the mom character, Bo. She said, basically it was like the child's job to figure out like what they were going to do during the gap year. And if your child is coming back home from college saying that, I can't handle it, like what makes you think that they can figure out exactly how they're going to, figure out what they want to do with their lives? I think that that was the number one problem with that. So anyway, in addition to that, watching that recently, I am in Facebook groups as a parent of a future college student and also as an expert in my field. And I am seeing parents who are saying, I sent my child off to college and they basically are not doing what they're supposed to do. They're wasting time. They're not going to class. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. So I figured I would give my perspective on what maybe you could do as a parent before they actually go off to college, what you can do now if the semester has not begun. Because one of the questions that a parent asked was, I don't even know if I should send them back for the second semester. I don't even know like what to do. Like, should I waste more money? Should I hope that they get themselves together, et cetera, et cetera? So that's the goal of today's talk. And I have a few notes here. And so let's get started. So number one, I think what parents, and if you are a parent of a high school student who is planning to go off to college in the fall, definitely take notes. This is something that you can do that's preventative and proactive. So I'm going to go over some things that parents can do in advance and some things that parents can do if they're in a situation where they need to decide whether or not their child can go back to college for the spring semester. Some colleges have already started for the spring semester, but it's still pretty early in the semester. So number one, if your child is, really highly achieving, really academic, really, did high school really well and all that, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful in college. Your child may be burned out. Your child may have been working hard, had a lot of pressure on them to get into college. And then when they get to college, they have the addition, both the combination of the pressure of continuing that trajectory of being successful, but also the freedom of no one really telling them what to do or hounding on them, not hounding them, because, I'm a parent, nagging, nudging, pushing, encouraging them to do what they need to do. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the challenge that can happen sometimes with students. Because I do have friends, and I've talked about this before, like friends who were really high achieving, friends who did really well in high school, and even students who I know who were really good in high school. And then they get to college and like the combination, like I said, of the freedom and all that, and what I call majoring in fun. So instead of, doing what you need to do, you are, overwhelmed with all the freedom, all the options, all the free time, all the wonderful things and freedoms and joy and partying that goes on with college. So one of the recommendations that I would make for parents is number one, communicate expectations. Like even for those parents who are in the spring semester and deciding whether or not they're going to go back, communicate expectations and have like an actual conversation, an open conversation. Your child is likely able to express, what they think that should happen. So have a conversation, have a negotiation with your child about what they will be able to do for the upcoming semester. Have a conversation about communication, because I think a lot of times parents send off their children, especially that first semester. Like I said, there was a lot of structure in high school. There was a lot of schedule, a lot of nudging, a lot of talking to your child. You get to see them every day, reminding them of things that happen in high school, and then they get off to college and are expected to figure out everything by themselves. So I think specifically for the fall semester, for those parents of high school students, and even in the spring semester, have a specific conversation about these things. Have a conversation about how often you're going to communicate, how often, whatever that communication is, if it's text, if it's phone, actual talking to someone, if it's coming back home or you visiting them for parents' weekend or whatever thing, have a regular schedule. And I have specific times that I think it's important. Definitely more frequently that first week, just to check in about how they're adjusting and transitioning is going to be a very frequent check-ins. Definitely at midterm. And one of the things that I also want you to do is to, trust that they're telling you what's really going on, but also verify. You can go in with your child in their portal or whatever they have and look at their midterm grades. Like ask them to send you a screenshot or actually go in there with them and see what their midterm grades look like, because that's usually the first point of feedback in how they're doing academically in the semester. So they should not be coming home at winter break and you're surprised about what their grades look like or what's going on, because you should be doing these regular check-ins and not just check in and they say, oh, everything's fine, because we know that fine doesn't necessarily mean fine. Like ask more in-depth questions, ask more specific things about what's going on, where they're struggling, what are they not happy with, how is college lived up or not lived up to their expectations, like their social network, their professional, like all of the questions that you need to provide more in-depth conversation and more in-depth check-ins with your child on a more regular basis. That way, if there is something that's going off the tracks, you're more able to jump in there, not necessarily jump in, but help them to problem solve, help them to figure out, who they need to go to for support, who they need to go to for help, things like that. So that would be the first thing that I would say that you can do that's proactive. Have a schedule, talk about communication, talk about when you're going to visit, talk about what your expectations are with regard to their grades. Oftentimes students, are expected to do well, but if you have like their specific class schedule, which you should have, like your child, if they struggle in math, if they struggle in writing, if they don't like to read, things like that. So have in-depth conversations about those specific classes. Like, what are you doing if you are having difficulty in this class? Are you using the resources at the university? Are you talking to the professor? Things like that. So that is one thing that I would say would be really important for you to do, having all of that. Mistake number 2, like I said earlier, when you expect your child or you haven't communicated with your child about having like their why for their intention or their reason for going to college, usually you had to write it in your essay, and hopefully it was not something that you just made up. It's a reason, like what's your motivation? Like what are your goals specifically with regard to what you want to have happen? And one of the classes that I teach, which is a student success class for first year students, like I have students create a bucket list of what they want to accomplish when they're in college. So when students have things or when kids have things to look forward to, then they're more motivated. And sometimes, the fun is always there, but having the discipline to use fun as a reward is going to be more valuable than just having fun all the time. Because not in addition to having fun, you got to deal with the consequences of you not being able to, because that is an option, not being able to return to school because you were having too much fun. That did happen to one of my friends. You have the problem of wasting money, especially if you as a student and or your parents had to take out money for loans. And then you also have the guilt that goes along with that, wasting your parents' money and things like that. So that is another point that I wanted to make. Sometimes, and this does happen, sometimes and I remember this episode of The Cosby Show, sorry, for those of you who do not want me to talk about The Cosby Show. But there was an episode of The Cosby Show where the oldest daughter went to, Princeton, I believe she went to, and then she went to medical school. And then after all of that, she decided that she did not want to be a doctor. She wanted to be a nature store owner or something like that. And so the wife in the Cosby Show was like, "You owe us $75,000, 600 and blah 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 and 52 cents." So that's the whole point. Like when students don't have a financial skin in the game, they call it, or buy-in, because loans aren't really tangible. But if you make a deal with your child that you need to pay me, not pay me back, but you need to come up with a certain amount of money, so you can have a real understanding of what college actually, the actual cost of college, because oftentimes there's a gap between what actually the financial aid or what have you covers and the actual bill. That's often a possibility. So if you make a deal with your child that you have to come up with a certain amount of money in order for you to be able to commit to what you want to do, which is get an education or get a degree and what have you, that can also be helpful for them. So I just wanted to talk about that part, like some preventative things. And the second part I wanted to talk about is what you can do if in fact you think your child needs a break for valid reasons. There are often times where students have mental health challenges. They aren't able to deal with all the pressures and the stress and all the independence that comes with college. And for those students, a gap year can really be beneficial. And another example of the thing with the what I started out with Blackish is that Junior was a really high achieving student. Like he got good grades. I think he was even accepted to Stanford or like an Ivy League school. So he had the grades. So you would think that he would be able to go to college and be okay. But like I said earlier, that's not always the case. When students, and I've worked with students who have feelings of, I don't want to, or I don't feel comfortable going to college, or I don't feel comfortable pursuing a degree because I don't really know what I want to do. I don't really understand, like, I don't want to waste money. I don't want to waste time. So that possibly was what was going on with him. So that's another good opportunity that can be addressed in a gap year. And specifically what needs to happen in a gap year is just not taking time off and then working at a fast food restaurant or working wherever. It's like 4 different things that experts say are important for you to have a successful gap year, which will allow the child to develop, mature, get a better sense of what their interests are with regard to what they want to study and or what they want to do with their degree. So the first thing is having an academic component. So even though they're not taking, the full schedule of whatever the full-time classes are, they can and should take like 1 or 2 classes at the local community college. They can and should take classes that are maybe not for credit at your local community center where they're learning something. So continuing to actively engage the brain and learn is definitely one of the 4 components that are essential to having a successful gap year. So that's one. The second part of having a successful gap year, it can be a couple of different options. And it's a matter of either working in a volunteer capacity or internship capacity in an actual organization where you're able to learn and grow. So you can do this type of work and or volunteering at an office setting, or if you as a parent or there are organizations that actually facilitate gap years. So if that is something that you're interested in, and you can do like a volunteer in your community, or you can do it like a travel, like going to another country, volunteering in another country as a part of your gap year. And that definitely broadens your horizon. You're able to see how other people live. And perhaps that can possibly ignite in you some sort of passion for social justice or women's rights or, water, something that, you didn't know about that can ignite a passion and a purpose in that student. And the third component of a successful gap year is going to be some sort of mentorship. So it can be a mentor in students may have many interests in a specific field, who's going to show them the ropes or give them some perspective on how they got to where they are. Maybe a person had a similar background, or someone who is that the student looks up to or really admires in your family or in your friend or social network, but someone who they can talk to give them advice and perspective on why it's important or why they love their job or why they are passionate about whatever they're doing. So someone, a mentor of some capacity who can help them in that regard. And then finally, the final part of the gap year experience is going to be some aspect of self-awareness and self-reflection. So that could be through a coach, that could be through a therapist, that could be some sort of personal growth or personal development experience. But at this age, at this stage of life, students are often still forming their identity, who they are. So focusing on personal development, personal growth with a coach, with an advisor, with a therapist is going to be a great component of that well-rounded experience that's going to prepare the child for actually going back into college and being more focused. And I know we all know people. I know people in my life and in my family who at 18 they were not necessarily ready to go to college, but later in life they got inspired, or the motivation because they were in a job that they didn't like or in a career that they didn't like, to actually go back to college and then focus. So it is my opinion that everybody can go to college, but not everybody needs to go to college when they're 18 years old. Because, like I said, you may not be ready, you may not be motivated, you may not be clear on exactly what the goal is, and at the cost and of time and effort that college takes. It can be better if you take a minute, take a year, take some years, and get clear on exactly what you want to do with a specific degree. I think gone are the old school beliefs that, you can go to college and figure it out. I think college is a very expensive way to figure out if you don't know what you want to do with a degree. And oftentimes, or sometimes, if you go in and you don't really know what you want to do with a degree, you can realize what you want to do, in your junior or senior year, which may add more time to your degree, and or you can actually get a degree. And I know, I'm sure you have these stories, because I do know these stories as well. You have a degree in something, and then you realize you want to do something else, which may require you to go back to school and get some additional schooling. So that is the point. That is the message that I wanted to talk about today. There are definitely some things that are preventative that you can do in advance before the semester begins, ideally before the fall semester begins and they actually leave off, to prevent your child from majoring in fun, as I call it. But let's just repeat what those things are. Definitely having a plan and a strategy for how you're going to communicate with the child. Definitely having a plan with regard to you communicating your expectations, and them also, and before that even happens, like, you need to have an open and honest relationship with your child, because it's often the case that students or children who go to college and go buck wild, it's because they don't feel like they have an opportunity to communicate and express themselves at home. So if it's early in the process for you, if you have a high school student, start opening those lines of communications. Like, what do you expect college is going to be like? What are you looking forward to with college and all that? So having those open lines of communication regarding what your expectation is about. Having fun, like what that means and all the ins and outs and all the things that they all have access to in a college setting where you're not necessarily around. Communicating with them on a regular basis, having those regular check-ins, trusting and verifying with regard to grades and things like that. And also having them do a real and honest and true assessment about what is the goal of them going to college, what is the goal of them getting a degree. And if they're not clear, that's definitely something that you can work on with them. You can hire an expert to work with them on that. But it's so important for them to have clear expectations, clear goals, clear intentions, and clear focus for why they're going to college. And if that is not the case, a gap year or taking time off, a semester off, a year off, what have you, can be helpful if it has those four components. An academic component where they're still learning, a mentoring component where they have someone who's guiding them with a specific intention, a volunteer or work component, and also a personal development component, which can be through therapy, through coaching, through what have you. So that is all I wanted to share for today. I did want to test out this setup. I have two things going on right now, so this has been fun. Definitely comment below if you're watching on the replay. Definitely comment below if you have any specific questions about, how to decide or how to make the decision whether or not to send your child back to college after they've had like a really messed up semester, where from your perspective, they haven't really been doing anything but having fun. But actually, it's important to have that conversation with them about, what your expectations are, what you expect, what they expect, what exactly happened. Because it could be like an honest reason as to why they have a 0.3 GPA. That's an extreme one, but maybe there's a reason. And when you get to the root of that reason, and sometimes you do need to bring in somebody who's external, who's not as emotional or invested in what is going on with your child. And that can be helpful as well. So until next time, I will see you. This is Phoenix, the College Success Professor, helping you to get the best return on your educational investment. Thanks for watching.